We're in the valley of the Rio Zuniac, which comes out of the Llanganates National Park, one of the biggest national parks in Ecuador, and one of the most mysterious, one of the least studied. Until recently, no scientist has explored this forest. So there are many new species of plants and frogs and other things hidden in this forest. Ecominga now owns this land that we're sitting on today, 800 to 900 hectares, ranging from elevations from 1,400 meters up to 2,200 meters. And we were discovering new orchids. We're even discovering new trees. A professor who works at a university near here discovered 2 new species of magnolias in our reserve, a little bit farther up this trail. So there's big, exciting things to be discovered here. Before Ecominga started, I spent most of my time exploring these forests, trying to discover new species of orchids, and I was finding quite a lot of new species right here in these mountains. So it turned out these mountains were really special biologically, but no one in Ecuador really paid any attention to them. The national park at the high elevations protected part of it, but a lot of the diversity that I was discovering was on the lower slopes below the protection of the national park. So I tried to get local governments interested in buying reserves here to protect it, but nobody was really interested. So a mix of Ecuadorian and foreign friends decided to form a foundation, Ecominga, and we began to try to look for money outside of Ecuador to try to buy some of this land. We had rapid success, starting with people in the orchid community, eventually the World Land Trust and the Rainforest Trust, other individual donors, orchid conservation societies, orchid lovers around the world started helping us. And so we started accumulating big reserves. Now we're up to about 5,000 hectares, about 12,000 acres of forest in 7 different reserves in this valley. And we've started an 8th reserve in the northwest with the help of the University of Basel in Switzerland. So our dreams are coming true. We'd like to continue purchasing land in this reserve to try to protect the lower elevation parts of the Rio Zuniac Valley. We walked all day through pretty nice forest, but at least 2/3 of that trip were through privately owned land that could be cut, theoretically. The most important crop in this area is called naranjita. It's a tomato relative, and people grow it to make juice out of the fruits. Can earn a lot of money by growing it. And it needs fairly fresh soil. So if you grow it on a plot of land, after just 2 or 3 years it'll stop producing and you'll need to cut another patch of forest. So it's about the worst crop for driving deforestation because you have to keep clearing new land. Cattle is also a problem. It's easy to cut a cattle pasture, drive some cattle up here and leave them for a while and come back and drive them back out to market. Even though it seems like we're far away from civilization, as the cattle walk, this isn't very far at all. You could easily drive cattle back to the road in a day. Selective logging is still a threat. There's some very valuable timber up higher which could attract people's attention. But the main thing is the naranjita. The neighboring landowners, especially in this reserve, are very supportive. We work together with them, we help them get their own land titles. In our other reserves, our neighbor Cerro Candelaria, near the town of El Placer. When I first started working there, looking at those forests, there was a lot of hunting. And now, there's almost none. And the local people, they used to hate birds because they ate their crops. They used to really dislike a lot of animals. And that's changed. They've seen our workers becoming passionate biologists, and they've seen biologists from around the world coming to their forest, their neighborhood, to study these special plants and these birds that they have. So they've now come to appreciate them. These aren't things to be taken for granted. These are special things because they've seen people come from thousands of miles away to enjoy these birds. And that changes their opinion of them. There are regulations that protect animals, but frankly, no one would enforce those regulations. If we hadn't been here, those regulations would have had, I think, very little effect. We don't want to grow continuously. We'd like to do a good job protecting the special habitats that we have. So that means extending the boundaries of the reserve to natural boundaries that we can protect and defend. Often rivers are excellent boundaries. It would be great to own something that controls local access to the reserve. So if we could go like to the road, to the entrance road, that's a great way to control people coming in and out. Once we have the full range of habitats protected in these reserves, we wouldn't like to keep growing. We'd like to just have reserves that are big enough to have sustainable populations of at least the average sized birds and mammals. All of our reserves, almost all of them, connect to a national park. The national park is at the high elevation end. Our reserves extend the protection to the more diverse low elevation habitats. That means that our reserves, even though they're not immense, are connected to a habitat big enough that the large mammals can continue to use our reserves. We don't risk the loss of large mammals just because our reserves aren't enormous. All of our reserves abut enormous high elevation habitat that's a reservoir for bears and tapirs. The special thing about almost all of our reserves is that they have a very wide range of elevations. They start at 2,000 or 3,000 meters sometimes, and they go down often more than 1,000 meters. So we have a tremendous range of habitats. Here in the tropics, there's a lot of turnover as you go up a mountain, a lot of species turnover. In orchids, in some genera of orchids, if you go up 300 meters in elevation, you change half the orchids. So, and that's true also for birds, it's true also for frogs, lots of things. So having a range of elevations lets us preserve a very high diversity in a very small area. But in addition to that, as climates change and as temperature rises and as cloud belts move around due to climate change, it's important to have continuous area of unbroken habitat for the species to be able to move up the temperature zone as it rises up the mountain. Lots of people try to take advantage of us. When they hear the word foundation, they immediately think deep pockets. So a lot of times people will ask us for at least double what they would ask anybody else. But if that happens, we just walk away. We're not in that much of a hurry. We're here for the long haul, so it's important for us to keep land prices from inflating. We won't drive land price inflation. So people offer us land for a reasonable price, we buy it. And people see that. Over time, they'll often come back to us years later and offer us land at a reasonable price. I'd rather be thinking strategically and avoid land price inflation than feeling like we have to be desperate for every piece of land and take every price that people ask. I never expected to be able to get enough support to buy so much of this valley. So that was a tremendous thrill to get the international support for it. And to be, for example, on the stage in London with Sir David Attenborough trying to raise funds for these forests with people like that. David Attenborough, who I grew up on his nature documentaries. To see him lending a hand helping us to save these forests was quite a special thing, quite a thrill. But we've had obstacles too. We've had lots of problems, mostly bureaucratic problems. Governments here, they work, but it takes a long time to get things done. And getting things done is very, very complicated with one hassle after another. Luckily, the local Ministerio de Ambiente from the beginning has been very, very helpful. The people here are genuine nature lovers, and they know that we're doing the right thing, and they help us as much as they can.